Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening. Continuing our investigation of the Wumenguan, the Gateless Barrier, Case 5, Xiangyan's Up in a Tree. Master Xiangyan said, "It's like a person up in a tree, hanging from a branch by their teeth. Their hands cannot grasp any bough. Their feet cannot find a hold on the trunk. Someone arrives at the base of the tree and asks, 'Why did Bodhidharma come from the West?' If they do not answer, they are avoiding a crucial question. If they do answer, they will die. In such a dilemma, how would you answer?" Wumen says, "Even if your eloquence flows like a river, it is of no avail. Though you can expound the whole of the Buddhist canon, it is of no use. If you can make an answer here, you will breathe life into the way that has been dead until this moment, and the path you have walked until now will die forever. If you cannot answer, you must wait for Maitreya Buddha and ask him." Wumen's verse: "Xiangyan really goes too far. His vile poison is limitless. He stuffs up the mouths of the monks, and demonic eyeballs spurt out from all over their bodies." Tight. 3 bells, yeah. Okay, so please feel comfortable while I talk. If you need to move, please feel free to adjust your posture. Do so in as non-disruptive a way as possible. So just be quick and don't prolong your adjustments. Xiangyan in Japanese is Kyogen. And Kyogen's teacher in Japanese again is Isan. And the two of them together, Isan and Kyogen, in the history of Zen, there were a number of branches or schools that developed. The one that we practice in currently is called the Rinji in Chinese, or Rinzai in Japanese. Another really well-known one is the Soto, or in Chinese I think it's like Cao Tung school. And these two teachers, Kyogen and Isan, they had another school which was called the Igyo, which comes from the first character of Isan and the first character of Kyogen when they come together. Igyo school. Such long explanations to these things. It's important to understand Kyogen or Xiangyan's background when we come to take up this particular case. So I want to talk a little bit about his story. He was a really well-educated monk, both scholastically and spiritually. He practiced in another tradition of Buddhism before ever coming to Zen. So he knew a lot about the sutras, and he knew a lot about the teachings of many masters, and he knew a lot about the forms and practices of several traditions of Buddhism. Apparently, before he practiced with Isan, he practiced under Pai Chang, who is Rinzai's grandfather in the Dharma. So he got around. And he was kind of known for being a talker and a kind of a smart guy, where if you had any kind of question, if you asked Xiangyan, he would go on at length about the history and the context and on and on and on. Kind of what we call in Zen stinky. He kind of smelled of Buddhism. One day when he was practicing with Isan began to talk to him about practice, and as usual, Kyogen went on at length. Before too long, Isan held up his hand and said, "Yes, all of this is great, but can you show me your face before your parents were born?" For those of you who have practiced Zen, this kind of a question, and what we've been talking about as we've continued through the gateless barrier, this is a challenging question. This is a koan. This is an opportunity for a person to stop talking and to demonstrate. He doesn't say, "Tell me about your face before your parents were born." He says, "Show it to me. Demonstrate." So the story goes that Kyogen was completely flummoxed by this challenge from Isan, being cut off and saying, "Show me your face, your original face before your parents were born." He was completely flabbergasted, unable to answer. And so he went back into his room and he started pulling out all of his books, looking for how people have responded to this question before in the past, and what the sutras could tell him about responding to a question like this. And anything that he found, he felt was really dissatisfactory, knowing his teacher and the way that his teacher responded and what his teacher expected. He knew that none of these answers would be satisfactory. And so he fell into kind of a dark mood, the dark night of the soul, as it could be called maybe. And after a few days of just not saying anything, which must alone have been quite remarkable in the monastery, of Kyogen walking around at the monastery just sort of mumbling to himself in a dark mood, he went to his teacher and said, "I don't think I'm cut out for this Zen stuff. I think I've really done my best, and I've studied all the sutras that there are to study, and I've really researched everything that I possibly could to the best of my ability, and yet you ask me this most simple question. I see it all the time in Zen texts, and people answer it all the time, but I can't think of anything to say to this. So I don't think I'm any good, and I think I should just leave the monastery. But I really feel like Buddhism is a worthwhile thing to serve, so I've heard that there's a shrine to one of the bodhisattvas on a nearby mountain, and I wonder if I could go and practice there, just as a hermit. And so Isan said, yeah, okay, you can go do that. So the story goes that when Xiangyan got to the shrine, it was in a great state of disrepair, and so he set about his practice, meditating and doing work practice, essentially cleaning up the disrepair of this shrine. And it's a kind of shrine where people who would go up the mountain would stop at the shrine and make offerings and maybe sit for a while and do some prostrations, maybe make an offering to the monk who was maintaining the shrine and continue. Not a lot of talk, not a lot of visitors. And it said that one day during Samu, that Xiangyan was just sweeping the walkway, and a stone shot out from his broom and hit the bamboo that was growing beside the pathway. Tok! And with this sound, there was this unification. It said Xiangyan had this awakening, profound awakening. Something that isn't held in any sutra book, and it's not held in any form. This recognition of the fundamental unification of all things. Something that's available all the time, open to us all the time. Xiangyan saw through this in this moment of the stone hitting the bamboo. After this happened, Xiangyan felt like he had something to say. Finally, he could respond to Isan. I don't know how much time passed, maybe years. So he packed up his things and went back to Isan and replied. And Isan said, not bad. Still more practice. So Xiangyan rejoined that community, but his practice was very much different. He wasn't looking for the answers in his books anymore, but he began to engage in his practice, day-to-day practice, his living practice, more fully. So that brings us to today's case, and we can have better insight into Xiangyan, or Xiangyan, why he would talk like this. Master Xiangyan said, "It is like a person up in a tree hanging from a branch by their teeth. Their hands cannot grasp any bough. Their feet cannot find a hold on the trunk. Someone arrives at the base of the tree and asks, 'Why did Bodhidharma come from the West?' If they do not answer, they are avoiding a crucial question. If they do answer, they will die. In such a dilemma, how would you answer?" So as you know, whenever I'm talking about cases, I always encourage us to really recognize that the case should not be taken in a very linear or literal way. If we're to understand a koan, we have to dive into it. We have to completely immerse ourselves into it. And we have to contemplate it or investigate it in a very spherical way, which is to say, we can't just take up one position. We can't just identify with one aspect. We have to investigate the case from each aspect, each component, each dynamic. I think that each and every one of us can think of a time in our life, or a circumstance in our life, or a situation that we've found ourselves in, where we've found ourselves feeling just like this person up in the tree. If you can imagine yourselves literally hanging from a tree by your teeth, maybe even over a cliff, on this big tree hanging over a cliff. Each of us has ideas about how we ought to live, ideas about who we are as a person, ideas about how we should go about living our lives, what's real, what's not real, what's good and what's bad. And these things, even our ideas about ourselves, they grow and they develop, and we attach to them. And so, sometimes it's a good thing. Trees aren't bad things, they're beautiful. Our ideas of ourself aren't necessarily bad things, they can be quite beautiful. We can become beautiful people. Or we can become really attached to a very negative idea of self, of who it is that I am. We can become attached to a broken and inadequate idea of self. And yet, even if we can acknowledge it as a broken, incomplete, uncompassionate, unwhole, unwise, unintelligent self, when we make it into our self, it's mine. We attach to it. We fixate it. We get stuck on it. Sometimes situations arise in our lives, that opportunities arise in our lives that ask us to jump or to respond to that circumstance. But a lot of the times we find that our fixation with ourself is such that we can't respond, even if we wanted to. Even if it seems like a wonderful opportunity, we're so stuck on who it is that we think we are, or what it is we think we ought to be doing, or how it is we think it ought to be, that we're just like this person hanging by our teeth in a tree. Unable to, what does it say here? Their hands cannot grasp any bough. Their feet cannot find a hold on the trunk. We're kind of stuck. The circumstances around us can do whatever the circumstances are going to do, but we're kind of stuck. We're not able to do anything. The case says that someone arrives at the base of the tree and asks, why did Bodhidharma come from the West? This is a formula question in Zen. Why did Bodhidharma come from the West? Now, this is a meaning question, meaning-seeking question. And it refers to our historical ancestor Bodhidharma, and asking, for what purpose did he come from India to China to teach Zen? Why? Why did he do that? But it's a stand-in question. It's like X. It's a variable. Fundamentally, it is the question why itself. Why are you doing the things that you're doing? Why do you believe the things that you believe? Who are you? Or, as Xiangyan himself faced, what was your face before your parents were born? Who is this person that comes to the base of the tree? Again, I encourage you to take up the position of the person who's coming to the base of the tree as well. And isn't it the case that as we practice, as we go through our lives, we sometimes catch a glimpse of ourselves hanging from a tree, stuck, bound up in our fear and our aversion, bound up in how we think things ought to be? And isn't it the case that we ask ourselves this question? Why? Why am I so caught up? Why am I so stuck? Why am I so scared? Why don't you do something? Why don't you say something? What's wrong with you? And this dilemma is the dilemma that is presented in this case. At some time in our practice, we find ourselves hanging by our teeth. In some ways, in a formal practice, it is the job of the teacher or the abbot to not necessarily to provoke this circumstance, because I really don't believe that this circumstance needs to be provoked. I think as human beings, sooner or later, we're going to find ourselves in this circumstance. So maybe our job is to allow this to happen, to clarify that it is happening, and to ask the question that is the last question in the case proper, which is, in such a dilemma, how would you answer? How do you answer? When you find yourself in this situation hanging from a tree, when you find yourself in this situation where you are saying, why? Why stuck? Why are you hanging in the tree? Why are you so attached? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? Why are you in the relationship that you're in? Why are you doing the work that you do? If you do not answer that question, which is coming from nobody other than you, your true nature, you're avoiding a crucial question, hanging on by your teeth, hanging on to this circumstance, this life that you have, which, when we consider hanging by our teeth on a tree over a great precipice, this is how we're living our life. Is this a life? If you do answer, you will die. If you do open your mouth to respond, it means letting go of all that you have been holding on to. This self that you've been holding on to, this work that you've been holding on to, right and wrong and good and bad and what's supposed to be. And you fall. This life that has been falls and dies into the abyss, the blackness of the unknown. Wumenguan says, even if your eloquence flows like a river, it is of no avail. Though you can expound the whole of the Buddhist canon, it is of no use. When it comes to practice, when it comes to manifestation, cleverness doesn't have much place. Knowing a lot of quotes isn't terribly useful if you can't put those quotes into manifestation in your own life. I love Facebook. All day long we can sit and read wonderful quotes from wise people scrolling past us at an alarming rate. But when we come to a dilemma in our own lives, when we come to a hard place in our own circumstances, when we come to a place where we ourselves are dangling from a tree, not any of those quotes will help us. We ourselves have to respond. Wumen says, if you can make an answer here, if you can find yourself in that situation and make an answer, you will breathe life into the way that has been dead until this moment. You might say that you you can resurrect this life, a free, new, open, infinitely possible life. And the path that you have walked until now will die forever. You can't let go of the tree and have it back. This is one of the things that I have been talking with Haku about recently, which is awakening or realizations are things that you can't unhave. Through our practice, when we have a moment of clarity, when we have some insight into the nature of this dharma dhatu, this world, this activity, it's a transformative experience, and it's transformative in a way that you can't undo. You can't unsee things. You can't unrealize things. You can't re-grasp the branch of the tree once you've let go of it with your mouth. It says, if you cannot answer, you must wait for Maitreya Buddha and ask him. This, on the one hand, it sounds like, oh, well, if you can't figure this out, then you can just wait to ask Maitreya Buddha. But in some ways, it's a sort of goad, because Maitreya Buddha is the Buddha who's supposed to be born in the next world cycle. And as you all know, I've talked about, there's a Buddha every great kalpa, which is, it's the old, if you take a bowl the size of Ring Road at Uvik, and as deep as it is wide, and you fill it with poppy seeds, and you take out one seed every 3 years, then the amount of time that it takes to empty that bowl is a small kalpa, and 3 of those is a great kalpa. So if you can't figure out this question, if you can't respond to this question, then you just need to wait that much time and then ask that guy, because he'll be able to just tell you and you'll get it right away, no problem. But if you don't want to wait that long, you press yourself to answer this question. Wumen's verse. This is possibly my favorite of Wumen's little verses in the entire Gateless Barrier. Mostly because this case, particularly early in my own practice, was really fruitful and really caught me, described my way of approaching practice and myself so well. Xiangyan really goes too far. His vile poison is limitless. He stuffs up the mouths of the monks, and demonic eyeballs spurt out from all over their bodies. Wumen as we go through the gateless barrier, you'll find that Wumen has it's a sense of humor. That's the only way I can describe it. He has a wicked sense of humor. And oftentimes when he's complimenting people, it's actually critical. When he's saying harsh things about what they're saying or who they are, he's usually complimenting them. So when Xiangyan really goes too far, his vile poison is limitless. Whenever we're talking about poison or death in the gateless barrier, a lot of the time it's pointing to a poison for the self, for the fixated idea of who it is that we think we are, for our fixations and attachments. So Wumen here is offering up very strong praise for old Xiangyan. This is a very potent case, he's saying. Wow, this is too much. He stuffs up the mouths of the monks. How do you, if we think about this as a practical case, so you go into interview and your teacher asks you to recite this case, and at the end of that he says, in such a dilemma, how would you answer? Do you think that you can give a nice long explanation of what this case is about? You think that's going to work? There's nothing that you can say in this case. There's no word that you can offer to this case. This is a pure demonstration. You have to respond. You have to respond to this question of why did Bodhidharma come from the West? You have to respond to the question, what is your original face before your parents were born? You have to respond to the question, what is your true nature? How do you manifest your true nature? In practice, when we have these kinds of sits, particularly when we get into intensive practice, and I think in particular when we're doing it for a longer period of time for like a residential trainee, such as Haku is doing, there is a constant turning back in that takes place. And my role is to help or to reflect what's coming at me back in, so that there is this quiet that descends, this stillness that descends, this stability that descends. Trying to cut away and let fall away the distractions that we bring ourselves, that we give ourselves to facing this fundamental question. The distractions that we give ourselves that take us away from recognizing the way that we're grasping on to this tree. And if you can really grasp this case, this friction of this moment where you're completely pressed in this dilemma, you're completely pressed, and I think we've all experienced it actually, where we're completely pressed between who it is that we think we are and the circumstances as they have arisen before us. And there's this friction, this bang together where something has to happen here. There's a point of action that needs to happen, and if we don't do something, we're just stuck. And this is what Wumen is talking about here, because what happens when we find ourselves in that situation where, no, this is who I am, and this is what I believe, and this is what I am, and this is right, and this is how it ought to be, and the circumstances are churning around us, pointing in a different direction, asking us what we're doing there. The demon eyeballs that squirt out is such a graphic image, isn't it? I love it. it's a way of describing how we can behave in ways which we could never imagine. When we're placed in a circumstance like that, we can very easily become demonic in the sense that we begin to squirm, we begin to react, we begin to lash out, we begin to grasp things greedily, desirously, because we don't want to address this fundamental issue that we can't respond. We're too afraid or we're too bound to respond with our mouths. And so we have to do something. And so when Wumen talks about he stuffs up the mouths of the monks, we're in this situation where to respond is such a drastic act. To actually face the circumstances as they've arisen, to meet the challenge that's been presented us, means to die, means to let go of all of the things that we've known as being me, as being my limitations. I do this and I don't do that, even right and wrong, even what is supposed to happen. But we're often so bound to that we just can't let go. And certainly in my experience, when we find ourselves in that situation, until we are able to bring ourselves to face the questioner, our own questioner, as long as we sit there with our mouths stuffed up with tree, demon eyeballs, demon hands, demon arms, demon other appendages, all kinds of stuff squirt out of our body. We manifest in all kinds of ways which are not of benefit to ourselves or anyone else. The gateless barrier is the name of the text that all of these koans come from. So this case is just one of the gateless barriers. The book is not a book of riddles. It's not a book of mysterious keys to spiritual awareness. I always look at the gateless barrier as a owner's guide to being human. The cases aren't unusual things that you have to engage in some extreme spiritual practices to come across. This case, for example, is not a description of anything that requires special training to experience, but it's just a window into an experience that we will all have as human beings. It's a way of seeing it. It's a way of approaching it. It's a way of practicing with it and liberating ourselves from this dilemma. Master Xiangyan said, "It's like a person up in a tree hanging from a branch by their teeth. Their hands cannot grasp any bough. Their feet cannot find a hold on the trunk. Someone arrives at the base of the tree and asks, 'Why did Bodhidharma come from the West?' If they do not answer, they are avoiding a crucial question. If they do answer, they will die. In such a dilemma, how would you answer?" Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.